Montgomery Preservation 2021 Awards for Historic Preservation honor individuals who have rescued, restored, and rehabilitated historic buildings. Those who have chronicled and taught us about the places and events of county history. And groups who have dug in and advocated for historic preservation in our own backyards. This year, the awards selected by MPI recognize projects that help preserve places whose origins date from just after the Civil War, when formerly enslaved African Americans created independent communities, and German immigrants arrived in such numbers that a new town was named for them. The late 1800s, when arrival of the B&O Metropolitan Branch fueled development of new towns all along the railroad line, and streetcar lines spawned close-in suburbs where people could live in the country and work in the city. And the early 20th century, when Montgomery County extended its network of roads and bridges to reach some of its most remote areas. This year, MPI honors 8 projects, including an award for revitalizing an iconic Chevy Chase landmark to its original splendor, the Wayne Goldstein Advocacy Award for fighting for survival of the historic African American cemetery in Cabin John, the Michael F. Dwyer Award for rehabilitating a 100-year-old trestle bridge near Poolesville, an award for restoring the exterior of a late Victorian house in Gaithersburg to its original appearance, an award for installing accessible and historically appropriate walkways on the property of a beloved mansion whose grounds are open to the public, the County Executives Award for preserving a historic church and school in Quince Orchard and documenting the unification of 3 small congregations during a volatile era, an award for a careful archaeological study of a home site in an historic African American town in northwestern Montgomery County, and the Montgomery Prize to a distinctive individual for decades of documenting, advocating, and preserving information and local sites. MPI presents a 2021 Historic Preservation Award to Adrian Arsht for restoration and rehabilitation of the exterior of the Folly, the historic Tudor mansion on Chevy Chase Circle, and for the addition of an historically appropriate garden pavilion. Mary Sheehan of the Chevy Chase Historical Society will present a brief history of the house. Designer Tom Bent will describe the project, and County Council member Gabe Albornoz will present the award to Ms. Arsht.
In the 1890s, a new type of residential community emerged just north of the nation's capital in an area of Montgomery County that had previously been farmland. It reflected the vision and determination of Nevada Senator Francis Newlands, who purchased land and developed a community that became one of America's first streetcar suburbs. It epitomized the late 19th century suburban ideal. The estate at 9 Chevy Chase Circle stands as the architectural gateway to the historic Chevy Chase community. Completed in 1893, the original house looked very different than it does today. It was smaller and designed in the late Victorian style by Leon Deshaies, the architect best known for designing the mansion at the U.S. Naval Observatory that is now the official residence of the Vice President. The first occupants of 9 Chevy Chase Circle were Francis Newlands himself and his family. In 1909, he sold the property to William Corby, an astute entrepreneur whose inventions transformed the commercial bread-making industry in the early 20th century. Corby soon retained notable Washington architect Arthur Heaton, who transformed the original house into the Tudor Revival-style mansion that we see today. That work was completed in 1914, and Heaton's plans for the mansion are now housed at the Library of Congress. After Corby's death in 1935, His wife continued to reside at the estate for over 30 years until her death in 1967. Since then, the house has been owned by 5 different owners, only one of whom ever occupied it as a family home. When one owner was unable to sell the house, he proposed to subdivide and redevelop the property. In an effort to preserve the property, concerned Chevy Chase residents acted to have it designated as an individual site in the Montgomery County Master Plan for Historic Preservation. In March 2020, the property was purchased by our awardee, Adrian Arsht. At that point, the mansion had not been occupied for 20 years. Over time, lack of use caused many features of the property to deteriorate, to become run down and damaged by weather. Ms. Arsht, who has extensive experience in restoring historic properties, has devoted more than 2 years to the restoration and preservation of this architectural treasure. For the first time in 2 decades, lights are again burning brightly throughout the mansion, illuminating the northeast section of Chevy Chase Circle, and once again serving as an iconic point of entry from Washington into Montgomery County.
When Adrian Arsht purchased the property, it was in terrible disarray. So we hired Gibson Home, LLC, Cass Engineering, and Tanglewood Conservatories to help us with the renovation of this gorgeous piece of property. The house was built in 1892 and went through many renovations. When Adrian purchased it, everything you see was painted beige.
The team removed the paint from the masonry, bringing it back to its natural color. They removed the canvas enclosures and repaired the damaged features hidden behind them. They repaired all the original historic windows and doors, back to their original historic beauty. Repairing the roof presented major obstacles. All of the slate tiles had to be removed and underlayment repaired, and then all of the tiles replaced. An important part of the project was the addition of a Chinese pavilion, also what we're calling a folly. The new pavilion is modeled after a 1797 pavilion at Cassan in France. Like the original, the new pavilion extends over water, in this case an existing pool that had been converted into a lily pond. It was the custom of many of the great European and American estates to include a garden structure, a summer house, pavilion, or folly in a different style from the main house. Such garden buildings provided both shelter from the sun and rain and a visual surprise, an element of whimsy and sharp contrast to the seriousness of the main house. In keeping with this long-standing tradition, the new Chinese pavilion, or folly, serves as an architectural foil to the Tudor-style mansion. The house, with its uncoursed gray stone walls, leaded glass windows, slate roof, massive stone porte-cochere, and recessed entrance, is grand, castle-like, monumental, and protective. In contrast, the pavilion, with its wooden Chinese fretwork, 2-layered pagoda-shaped roof, wrought iron tracery, and vivid red, yellow, and lime color scheme, is at once exotic, colorful, open, and inviting.
Friends, this is Montgomery County Council President Gabe Albornoz, and it is my distinct pleasure to present this 2021 Historic Preservation Award to Adrian Arsht for restoring and rehabilitating the exterior of the Corby Mansion, now rechristened The Folly on Chevy Chase Circle. Miss Arsht breathed new life into what had been a deteriorating relic of the past, returning it to its status as a vital centerpiece of historic Chevy Chase. In addition, in the spirit of great historic estates, the already handsome result was embellished by the addition of a jewel of a Chinese pavilion to the surrounding garden. Miss Arsht revitalized a focal point of entry to Montgomery County from the District of Columbia and enhanced it even further by adding a stunning new feature into the restored landscape. Congratulations and thank you, Miss Arsht, on behalf of all of my colleagues on the County Council and our community.
Hello, I'm Adrian Arsht. Welcome to my home. I'm deeply honored to receive the 2021 Montgomery County Award for Historic Preservation. Restoring this house and the grounds has truly been a labor of love, with a few adventures thrown in. For example, these doors were the original from 1890. With the team of Al Royer of Gibson Builders, and Tom Bent, the interior designer, my dreams were realized. And why not? This team has worked with me on 5 houses, and this is the last one. I am so pleased to be a resident of the Chevy Chase Village community. And again, thank you for this award.
Wayne Goldstein was a civic activist, a fearless advocate, and a former president of Montgomery Preservation. An award for preservation advocacy has been established in his name. MPI presents the 2021 Wayne M. Goldstein Award for Preservation Advocacy to Friends of Moses Hall on behalf of Morning Star Tabernacle No. 88 Moses Cemetery, located on Seven Locks Road in Cabin John. The award will be presented by State Senator Susan Lee and will be accepted by Diane E. Baxter, Dr. Charles W. Harris, and Montgomery C. Crawford, 3 people whose ancestors lie buried in the historic cemetery.
Gibson Grove was the early post-emancipation settlement in Cabin John established by formerly enslaved and free people of color. Local families supported the first district school for black children, built in 1882, and formally established the Gibson Grove AME Zion Church in 1898. As early as 1885, residents also organized the Benevolent Society Morning Star Tabernacle No. 88 of the Ancient United Order of the Sons and Daughters, Brothers and Sisters of Moses, one of only 3 such orders of Moses incorporated in the county. Its mission was to educate orphan children, bury the dead, and care for sick and destitute members. Its members built a Moses Hall for community meetings and a Moses Cemetery for its members and their families. The history of Morning Star Tabernacle No. 88, its cemetery, and the remains of its Moses Hall illustrate an important part of our county's history during segregation. It tells a story central to many a post-emancipation black community when school, church, and benevolent societies were established while business, education, and even death were separated by race. In 2018, the state of Maryland announced plans to expand the Capitol Beltway, and this threatened the cemetery site, prompting Cabin John residents, Moses Cemetery descendants, and historic preservationists to rally. They reconstituted Morning Star Tabernacle No. 88 and established Friends of Moses Hall. Its mission is to protect and preserve the cemetery property in the face of both new highway construction and the ongoing damage caused by existing beltway, which physically split the Gibson Grove community in 2 when the highway was built in the early 1960s. Morning Star Moses Hall and Cemetery Site is a vital portal into Montgomery County's past. The work of Friends of Moses Hall honors the dead buried at this sacred site and preserves its history for the living.
As a Cabin John resident who lives right next door to the cemetery, the state's massive beltway expansion plans raised a serious alarm, especially when the first project drawings did not even note the cemetery's existence. An emergency meeting brought together concerned neighbors and descendants who were given a tour of the cemetery, which was not only overgrown but badly damaged by stormwater runoff from the beltway and bamboo plants that threatened to overtake the whole area. Out of this gathering grew a group of dedicated volunteers who focused on clearing the site and finding more descendants to reconstitute the Morning Star Moses entity so that the state could not continue to minimize the historic significance of the site. We formed Friends of Moses Hall in early 2020 to further organize advocacy efforts, successfully pushing the state to finish clearing the invasive bamboo that had grown from the highway fence line and to conduct sophisticated ground surveys to help discover the extent of burials. In one of the State Highway Administration's early reports for the Beltway Expansion Project, they stated that there were 7 known burials within Morning Star Moses Cemetery. Thanks to the efforts of the Friends of Moses Hall, we now know that the cemetery holds more than 350 buried remains, including more than a dozen likely grave sites in the current highway right-of-way. We also know the identities of close to 100 people buried there and are starting to uncover their stories. By engaging consultants and legal experts willing to work pro bono, we've dealt with legal issues and egregious flaws in the federal government's environmental impact process for the highway project. The National Trust for Historic Preservation highlighted the site's plight and honored Friends of Moses Hall's efforts when it recognized Morningstar Moses Cemetery as one of America's 11 most endangered historic places in 2021. While we are proud that Friends of Moses Hall has successfully raised awareness of the cemetery and minimized possible impacts to the site should the Beltway expansion project continue, we have much more to do to ensure the long-term stewardship of this special place.
Morningstar Moses Cemetery is the final resting place of people who lived in Cabin John all their lives. Family members of those buried there still call Cabin John home. The community of Cabin John is proud to support the efforts of Friends of Moses Hall. We are truly relieved the group was formed. If Friends of Moses Hall didn't exist, we're not sure the cemetery would either. For decades, residents of Cabin John have tried to be good stewards of the cemetery, organizing periodic cleanups and making attempts to document its history. But we lack the expertise and the resources to make much headway. Once the state's new highway expansion plans were announced, the Cabin John Citizens Association pledged its support to help preserve the cemetery and provided $2,000 towards the initial cleanup. We knew it would take a dedicated group focusing solely on the needs and concerns of the cemetery to save it from this latest threat. We've collaborated with Friends of Moses Hall to raise awareness of the serious threats the cemetery faces from the proposed Beltway expansion. We are very excited to support the group's plans for the cemetery's future, both as sacred space to honor those buried there and as a place that helps tell the history of African Americans in Cabin John and Montgomery County.
The 2021 Wayne M. Goldstein Award for Preservation Advocacy is awarded to Friends of Moses Hall on behalf of Morningstar Tabernacle Number 88, Moses Cemetery in Cabin John. This 19th century African American cemetery has been adversely affected by I-495 twice in the past. The Maryland Department of Transportation must continue to be persuaded to preserve the site from erosion and destruction and to protect the graves if the Beltway is again widened. I am so pleased to be able to present the award to 3 members of the Board of Trustees of Morningstar Tabernacle Number 88, Moses Cemetery. Their ancestors, the Coates family, the Harris family, and the Crawford family, represent all those families who lie buried in this historic cemetery, mostly in unmarked graves. Diane Baxter, Dr. Charles Harris, Montgomery Crawford, and their colleagues are to be congratulated for ensuring that the final resting places of their hardworking forebears will never, ever be forgotten.
Thank you for recognizing our years of advocacy and stewardship, documenting burials, surveying the site, clearing out invasive bamboo, and challenging a powerful agency like the Highway Department have all been fearsome activities, but many friends and subject matter experts are helping us. We are not losing heart.
This cemetery site is so important to descendants and others who consider it a sacred place. Its role matters in the accurate history of the Cabin John and Montgomery County area. Friends of Moses Hall hopes that someday the site will not only be used as a place of interment and reflection, honoring those who passed on, but will also be a site used to educate students and citizens of the role African American benevolent societies played during a period of legal and social segregation in Montgomery County. We thank you for recognizing our efforts and for helping us raise awareness.
Mike Dwyer was the first and longtime historian for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission and a mentor to generations. An award has been established in his name as special recognition for documentation, education, archaeology, and/or preservation. MPI presents the 2021 Michael F. Dwyer Award to the Montgomery County Department of Transportation for rehabilitation and preservation of the historic Montevideo Road Bridge in Poolesville. The award will be presented by County Council member Andrew Friedson and will be accepted by Brian Copley, Project Manager, and Chris Conklin, Director of the Montgomery County Department of Transportation.
You may not know this, but the one-lane bridge on Montevideo Road played a big role in the creation of the county's Rustic Roads program. Back in 1986, the county planned to replace this bridge with a long, straight, four-lane bridge. People in the nearby communities were upset, so instead, the county council did a study of the rural roads, including other roads with one-lane bridges, gravel roads, and historic roads. Out of that study, the Rustic Roads program was created. These historic and scenic roads are now considered prominent heritage tourism assets. We look forward to more successes like this with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation.
To follow up from Laura Van Etten's short history of the Rustic Roads program, its main sponsor on the council at the time was Neil Potter, who later became county executive. Mr. Potter very much objected to the planned reconstruction of the bridge that the Department of Transportation wanted to do at the time. And he went so far as to examine the abutments of the bridge himself by putting on his hip waders and going into the creek, which was not dry at that point. It was not a dry Seneca Creek, to prove to himself that the abutments were decent enough shape, that all it needed was some rehabilitation and not a complete reconstruction of the bridge.
The Montevideo Road Bridge was constructed around 1910 across dry Seneca Creek, and it's a one-lane Warren Pony Truss Bridge on masonry abutments. These abutments are constructed of red sandstone and are similar in appearance to the stone used for nearby buildings and roadside walls. Seneca Quarry is often identified as the source of this building stone. One of the best known structures built from Seneca sandstone is the Smithsonian Castle on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The specific history of Montevideo Road Bridge is not known. There are no plaques on the bridge, and the designer is unknown. Truss bridges, including Warren truss bridges, were once common in Maryland, and more than 25 companies have been identified as builders in the state between 1850 and 1920. When built, the Montevideo Road Bridge would have been an important year-round crossing of the dry Seneca Creek, providing access for local farmers and Dawsonville residents to the Seneca Mill that was established by 1750, and to the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal that opened in 1830 between Little Falls and Seneca.
A routine inspection revealed a critical defect in the bottom cord of the bridge truss and severe section losses of the stereo stringers. The bridge was failing, and we knew we had to address it quickly. As the county's project manager, I crafted a plan with contractors Whitman Reckard and Associates and Concrete General to repair the bridge while minimizing disruption to a nearby farm and winery. We used a crane to lift the bridge off its abutments and moved it to a nearby staging area, allowing us to install a temporary bridge and reopen Montevideo Road to vehicular traffic. We cleaned, painted, and reused the salvageable parts of the bridge. Deteriorated and undersized structural members were replaced in kind and connected with bolts. CNS pyramid builders carefully repaired and repointed the sandstone abutments. After the repairs, we lifted the truss bridge back into place. I'd like to thank Montgomery Preservation and the Rustic Road Committee for recognizing this project. I'd also like to thank Whitman Reckard and Associates, Concrete General, and all the county staff that helped make this project successful. Thank you.
Hello, I am ecstatic to join with Montgomery County Preservation to present the 2021 Michael F. Dwyer Excellence in Preservation Award to my friends and colleagues in the Montgomery County Department of Transportation for their extraordinary rehabilitation and preservation of the historic Montevideo Road Bridge. This one-lane 1910 bridge spans Dry Seneca Creek near Poolesville. It's in the National Register's Seneca Historic District, and it's eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. Montevideo Road itself is designated as an exceptional rustic road, and the bridge is a significant feature of the road. While necessary to the use of this narrow rural road, the Montevideo Road Bridge was found to be compromised due to a fundamental critical crack in its infrastructure. So how do you avoid replacing the Montevideo Road Bridge with a modern multi-lane bridge? Well, enter the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, who came to the rescue. McDock created a team of engineers and workers to address the old truss bridge. If you know me, you know I love local history, and I am so grateful that they were able to repair and preserve this singular asset to our county and our community, and for keeping this familiar feature of the Seneca Historic District of Montgomery County intact and in use. For this, the Montgomery County Department of Transportation has earned the Michael F. Dwyer Excellence in Preservation Award. Congratulations, and well-deserved.
We're really grateful to Montgomery Preservation, Inc. for recognizing Montgomery County DOT's work here on the Montevideo Road Bridge. This is a unique example of preserving a historic bridge, and I'm really thankful to the dedicated staff in the department who took the time and energy to figure out how to preserve this important part of our history. We take a systematic approach to maintaining bridges in Montgomery County, looking at about 500 of them every 2 years to see what kind of work is needed to keep them safe. About 5 of them each year are rebuilt or restored, and this is an example of one of those bridges from a couple years ago. It's really exciting when these bridges are located on about the 100 rustic roads we have in the county, because that gives us a unique opportunity to look at how we can serve as stewards for this infrastructure and maintain the cultural and visual heritage of our county.
MPI presents the next award to Leanne Feiss for the restoration of the exterior of the historic Meme House in Gaithersburg. Architectural historian Judith Christensen will outline the history of the house. Contractor Stephen Barnard of Wentworth Studios will describe the work, and Council Member Sidney Katz will present the award to Mrs. Feiss.
1862 was not the best time to invest one's savings. The Civil War was on, and the B&O Railroad was only a hopeful proposal, and in 1863 it went bankrupt. Martha Meme, wife of George Meme, took that time to purchase 200 acres of land near Gaithersburg for $5 an acre, $1,000. They lived at a place called Mount Washington. Mount Washington was named because they were George and Martha, and they had a cherry tree. And it was on the most northern part of their property, whereas now over on the north side of the I-270. It was not in the town of Gaithersburg because the town of Gaithersburg didn't exist. So George died in 1865, and he left Martha and 6 children to live off their investment and land. It eventually began to pay off for them when the B&O bought right-of-way through her land for the railroad, and rail service eventually started in 1873. At that point, Gaithersburg began to grow very rapidly. Her risky investment supported this family for the next 60 years. When Gaithersburg incorporated in 1878, in 1879, Martha obtained a $2,000 loan, twice what she paid for her 200 acres, and built a grand new house in town. The Meems were active citizens in Gaithersburg. Her son, George Washington Meem, was elected as a town council commissioner and then became the first official, quote, mayor, unquote, in 1889. They formed a band. They enjoyed the role of being influential citizens with a grand and impressive house. And they lived there until Albert, the last Meem to occupy the house, died in 1934. And at that point, the Meem era in Gaithersburg ended. Only the house remained to recall their contributions to the city. Another war intervened and affected this house. World War II took labor and materials away from the housing occupations, and many of the grand old houses were split into apartments because housing was needed. 104 became 2 apartments, and we think that at that point the small 1-story addition was put on to create a second kitchen, and the upstairs door was closed and sealed with a window to provide another bathroom. On top of that, since labor was hard to find, aluminum siding was added in the 1940s and 50s, and it took away a lot of the nice detail. Well, the Chestnut Meem Historic District was designated in 1997. Well, in 2012, Robert and Leanne Feiss bought it. In 2020, the widowed Mrs. Feiss, who loved the house but needed to move elsewhere, applied to restore the house exterior, believing it would help ensure its longevity. It is now the centerpiece of an impressive trio of Victorian-styled houses on Chestnut Street.
Wentworth Design Studio is an architectural design build firm operating out of Chevy Chase, Maryland. We're delighted to see the recognition that this project has received. When we first arrived on site to evaluate the home's exterior conditions, we found that the home had been wrapped in aluminum siding and there were numerous areas of rot and decay. During the removal of the aluminum siding, we found that most of the exterior trim boards had been removed and all exposed surfaces were covered with lead-based paint. During the repairs, whenever possible, we used reclaimed and salvaged materials in keeping with the historical design of the home. The additions and changes to the home were addressed with new siding and trim meant to complement, but at the same time delineate those changes from the original house. I would like to thank Leanne Feiss for the opportunity to have worked on such a beautiful home, and I applaud MPI for their efforts in recognizing the historical significance of Montgomery County and those involved with its preservation.
Hello, this is Montgomery County Council Member Sidney Katz. I'm delighted to present this award to Leanne Feiss for the restoration of the exterior of the historic 1879 Martha A. Meem house in Gaithersburg. The house is the earliest Second Empire-style house to be built in Gaithersburg, and it is the only remaining example of that form. To restore the original exterior materials and character of the house, workers removed aluminum siding and restored or replaced the handmade beaded wood lap siding. They also restored the patterned front gables and the elaborate fretwork on both front porches to their original appearance. Finally, on a modern addition, they replaced aluminum siding with plain wood German siding and repainted the whole house in a period-appropriate color scheme. Ms. Weiss hired experts who specialized in historic restoration to ensure that all the work was meticulously done and that the results matched the original elements uncovered by historical photographs. The project did more than bring this treasure back to its former grandeur. The restored house stands as an example of the elegant Victorian roots and prestige of the historic district's original period of construction. It and its compatible newer neighbors on Chestnut Street are positive proof of the value of historic preservation to restore the visual 19th century beginnings of this historic street. Congratulations and thank you, Ms. Weiss.
Hi, my husband and I moved to the DC area in 2009. And in 2012, we finally made a commitment to buying our home and staying in the area. So I started doing a house search, specifically targeting older homes because I really appreciate the tremendous character that they come. They're sort of imbued with the lives of the people who lived in them. So when I found the listing for 104 Chestnut Street, I just knew that this house was special. And then I got to do the first walkthrough with my realtor and I felt the house. I knew that I belonged in this house and that there would be history for me with it. I was very fortunate. The people from whom we purchased the house had done a lot of research. So I had the home's history available to me. And I had pictures of what the house looked like when it was first built. And I told my husband that I wanted to restore the house. I wanted to give it its character back because at some point, the house had had aluminum siding put over the front of it, painted a very dull color, and really had just lost its visual character and appeal. So it took a while. I didn't get to do the project right away, but finally I did. And finding a contractor to do the work during COVID is really tough. I did a lot of search. I did a lot of contacting out and trying to get people to respond to me. And I finally found a company, Wentworth Studios, based out of Chevy Chase, that has history in the Montgomery County doing restorative work. And he was willing to take on the project. And it was an incredible opportunity to work with some professional people who have great ideas for how to do this. They were able to pull out that old aluminum siding, take the pictures that I had given them of the house when it was first built, and restore the exterior. Some of the shiplap siding on the house had rotted underneath that aluminum siding, and they were able to take that off and recreate to the original profile, brand new shiplap siding to match. And then they were able to put on this incredible paint scheme that just kind of made the house pop and look incredible. And it was an honor to work with them, but it was, I think, more an honor to be able to give this house back to itself, to make it really worthy of the historic designation that it carries, and to give it back to the city. It was a really, really, it was a point of pride for me to be able to do this.
MPI presents a 2021 award to the Audubon Naturalist Society for installation of historically appropriate, accessible walkways through the woods and around the mansion of Wood End Nature Sanctuary in Chevy Chase. Amy Ritzko-Warren will give us some history of this property, and Beth Zebarth will tell us of her appreciation of the accessible nature trail. Maryland Delegate Jared Solomon will present the award to Lisa Alexander, Executive Director of the Audubon Naturalist Society.
Wood End Sanctuary comprises a mansion, garage, and 40 acres of forest lawns and meadows in Chevy Chase near Rock Creek Park. The mansion is the former home of Captain and Mrs. Chester Wells and is now the headquarters of the Audubon Naturalist Society. Designed by noted American architect John Russell Pope and built in 1927, the site is on both the National Register and the Montgomery County Master Plan for Historic Preservation. For 50 years, A&S has opened Wood End to the public, but for many visitors, the trails were not accessible. People in wheelchairs or pushing baby strollers were not able to enjoy the forest, stream, and pond. A&S set a goal to improve visitor experience and increase opportunities for people of all ages and abilities to enjoy the property. To do this, walkways on the grounds needed to be durable, safe, and accessible, as well as compatible with the historic house and setting.
With an accessible nature trail, we have the opportunity to provide all visitors with the opportunity to relax, heal, and learn in nature. Veterans in treatment at the nearby Walter Reed National Military Medical Center are able to make nature part of their recovery. School children with disabilities can fully participate in the Audubon Naturalist Society's award-winning education programs, enjoying for the first time the rich environmental learning opportunities of Wood End's habitats. With smooth and stable trails and boardwalks in place, all people with mobility challenges can now stroll deep into the shaded canopy of the Wood End Forest, wander past butterfly-filled meadows, and cross right over a stream. As an Audubon Naturalist Society board member, I was thrilled to be one of the first to use the restored trail and visit the pond I had only seen in pictures.
Montgomery Preservation presents a 2021 award to the Audubon Naturalist Society for hardscaping and landscaping to make the grounds of their Wood End Nature Sanctuary more accessible to all visitors. We know, particularly with the pandemic, how important it is for all of our community to be able to access our incredible natural resources. From 2020 to 2021, Audubon Naturalist Society installed a nature trail for all through its woods. It is about 1,600 feet of a 8-foot wide permeable bonded gravel that is wheelchair accessible and stroller accessible. The trail takes visitors through woodland, meadow, pond, and stream habitats and includes several handicapped parking spaces, accessible composting toilets, a water fountain, a bike repair station, resting areas and benches, and an outdoor classroom location. The Audubon Naturalist Society also installed new walkways inspired by other Pope-designed properties around two sides of their mansion. Working extensively with the County Historic Preservation Commission staff and commissioners, Audubon Naturalist Society succeeded in providing complete access to natural amenities that enhance the use of the property for everyone. For installation of historically appropriate, accessible for all walkways through the woods and around the mansion of Wood End, the Audubon Naturalist Society has earned a Montgomery County Award for Historic Preservation. I'm so pleased that the state of Maryland was able to partner with the Audubon Naturalist Society, and I want to offer my heartiest congratulations on your award.
Thank you to Montgomery Preservation and to Delegate Solomon for this wonderful and meaningful award. I am so proud of the vibrant Audubon Naturalist Society community. They committed to creating a beautiful, restored, accessible, climate-resilient nature sanctuary to welcome all people and wildlife while honoring our historic property in innovative ways. For the first time ever, our new trails and walkways enable people of all abilities to comfortably visit our historic mansion and all of the natural habitats at Wood End, including restored meadows, forest, stream, and pond. Just think of the nature enthusiasts, the seniors, the veterans, and students who use mobility assistance devices. At last, all of Wood End is theirs to explore. And on our horizon will be the installation of a wheelchair-accessible nature play space for children. We are proud and honored to be recognized by Montgomery Preservation for our conservation and preservation work.
The 2021 County Executives Award is presented for preservation of the Pleasant View Historic Site in Quince Orchard and for production of the related documentary film Finding Fellowship. Sarah Rogers of Heritage Montgomery will give us the history of post-emancipation Black communities and why it is important to preserve them. County Executive Mark Elrich will present the award to the Reverend Gerard A. Green, chairperson, on behalf of the Pleasant View trustees, and to Jason Green and Dr. Keisha Davis, co-producers of Finding Fellowship.
Hello, I'm Sarah Rogers, Executive Director of Heritage Montgomery. I'm pleased to speak briefly on the amazing background of the Pleasant View Historic Site. Following emancipation of enslaved people in 1864, newly freed African Americans bought land, reestablished family ties, and began building new communities. Over 40 communities and numerous enclaves or neighborhoods were erected here in Montgomery County. These communities were established to provide safety, security, and support. Homes and small farms often surrounded a church, a school, and a community hall. Pleasant View is one of a number of these sites still standing as testament to the triumph of its founders. The cemetery contains names like Green, Ridgely, Magruder, and Hallman, whose descendants still look after the buildings and property in Old Quince Orchard. As with many historic sites, as time passes, history is in danger of being lost to future generations. Realizing this fact, the Green family and the Pleasant View Historical Association Board of Trustees came together with local schools, heritage groups, state and county leaders to save their legacy and to share it with others. Thank you, Jason and Reverend Green, and everyone who literally blazed the trail to save and lift up Montgomery County's African American history. Heritage Montgomery is proud to have been a part of this journey.
The Pleasant View Historic Site was once the center of the African American community of Quince Orchard. Pleasant View Methodist Episcopal Church, built in 1888, still stands as a witness to this community. The nearby Quince Orchard Color School, built on land purchased for the purpose in 1868, not only educated local children of color until integration was mandated in the 1950s, but it also served as a community hall. Efforts are ongoing to restore and rehabilitate these buildings and to maintain the adjoining cemetery. Quince Orchard once had 3 Methodist churches, 1 black and 2 white, a surprising number for such a small community. In 1968, at almost the same moment as Martin Luther King was assassinated, 3 churches came together as one integrated church. They built a new structure and gave it a new name, Fairhaven United Methodist Church, and preserved in spite of the obstacles. The documentary Finding Fellowship chronicles this journey, revealing the story of Quince Orchard's residents, both black and white. The film may be seen on PBS and also through the Pleasant View site website. It is with great pride and pleasure that I present the 2021 Executives Award to 3 members of the Green family for their work on behalf of Quince Orchard. The award goes to the Reverend Gerard A. Green, chairperson of the Pleasant View Trustees, and to his son Jason Green and daughter Dr. Keisha Davis for co-producing the extraordinary film Finding Fellowship.
Hi, my name is Reverend Gerard A. Green Jr., and I'm the chairman of the Pleasant View Historical Association. And on behalf of the trustees of the Pleasant View Historical Association, I'd like to thank Sarah Rogers for nominating us, and I'd like to thank County Executive Elridge, Eileen McGuckian, and Montgomery Preservation Incorporated for recognizing our work, preserving the Pleasant View Historic Site. The Pleasant View Historic Site was the cornerstone of the Black community of Quince Orchard for nearly 100 years and supported the arc of life in the community. Students were educated in the one-room schoolhouse. Families bonded, worship, and had their spirits uplifted in the church building. And loved ones were buried, honored, and remembered in the cemetery. Our restoration project is important both as a testament to the historic community, to say that they existed and they mattered, but also to make this site accessible to a new and changing community, to feel connected to this place and be benefited from the lessons of overcoming, dedication to family, faith, and reconciliation that are core to Pleasant View. We have been so moved by the outpouring of love and support for our preservation project. But of course, there are still many opportunities to support this important effort. So please go to www.pleasantviewsite.org if you would like to get involved. And thanks to everyone's tremendous effort, when we're done, Pleasant View will once again be open to the public to better understand who we are as a people and to get proximate so we can move forward together. Thank you.
A small rural community in Maryland was home to 3 Methodist churches, 1 black and 2 white, divided generations earlier over the issue of slavery. But in 1968, as the country faced a turning point,
those 3 churches decided to reconcile and to forge a new future. There's an important story that needs to be told, and we have a responsibility to make certain that it continues.
Hi, my name's Jason Green, and I'm the director of Finding Fellowship. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of my sister, Keisha Davis, who I co-produced this film with, along with all the members of the Quince Orchard Project and everyone who gave of their time and their talent. So frankly, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank the county executive, Sarah Rogers, for nominating us, and Eileen McGuckian and Montgomery Preservation for this honor and recognition. You know, we believe in the power of storytelling as a means to connect and inspire people, but also as a way to keep communities alive. When my sister and I started this project, it's because many of the members of the Quince Orchard community were aging. And indeed, many of those members who appear in our film have been called home. But just as the Pleasant View Historic Site will stand as a testament to the Quince Orchard community, we are proud that our film, Finding Fellowship, will continue to live on and share their powerful personal and collective stories with the world. We're so excited that the film has now been seen and broadcast in 99% of PBS stations across the country, and that communities around the globe are learning the lessons of love, sacrifice, faith, and family that are planted deep in the soil of Quince Orchard. For any that would still like to see the film or who would like to help us share our story with their community or other communities, please be in touch. You can go to findingfellowship.film to see the story and to help us share it. And lastly, let me just say thank you again for this important recognition. Appreciate you so much.
Oh, they tell me, tell me of a home.
MPI presents the next award to community archaeologist and educator Tara Tatro and the Sugarland Ethno-History Project for the archaeological study of the Basil and Nancy Dorsey home site. This archaeology project sprang from the Ethno-History Project, which in 2020 published the award-winning I Have Started for Canaan, the story of the African-American town of Sugarland. Historian Jeff Sipek discusses the history of Sugarland and the Dorseys. Caroline Taylor of the Montgomery Countryside Alliance describes the project process. The award is presented by County Council member Will Jawando and accepted by Tara Tatro and Sugarland Ethno-History Project President Suzanne Johnson.
Slavery ended in Maryland on November 1st, 1864, before the end of the Civil War. And out here in western upper Montgomery County, many of the families who had been enslaved stayed here, and they formed their own communities pretty much out of nothing. Sugarland was one of several of these Black communities, and one of the biggest. Gwen Reese of Sugarland used to say it wasn't real freedom yet, but it was a step forward. These were places of safety and belonging that gave their descendants a strong foothold in the world, and they worked to be self-sufficient like large extended families. Now, Basil and Nancy Dorsey were both in their 40s in 1874 when they bought 4 acres of land at Sugarland, right next to where the church stands today. Now, it's interesting that the land deed was in Nancy's name, not Basil's, making her one of 4 women at Sugarland who were property owners, at least on paper. The Dorseys bought their land from Augustus and Catherine Webb, a white couple who lived in Baltimore. Now, it's possible that the Webbs never even set foot out here, but they were related by marriage to Jane Plater Pleasance, an elderly white woman, twice widowed, who lived just up the road. Now, all of her descendants predeceased her, and I think it's likely that Sugarland families probably helped Mrs. Pleasance maintain her farm and her big lonely house. She may have had a strong relationship with the women of Sugarland in particular, which could explain why some of the land deeds are in their names. And so the Dorseys built a small 1-story log house with a garden and the usual farm outbuildings, a pig pen, a meat house, an outhouse, and a hen house. And later they added a wood frame kitchen. They had 6 children, all of them probably born and fairly grown before they built their homestead. And by the 1880s, there were at least 15 other households nearby. Unlike most of the men from the other founding families, Basil Dorsey did not take an official leadership role in the church or the school, and Basil and Nancy were said to be one of the poorest families in the community. But they show up in the church records as being very generous with donations of money and food for different events. And by the early 1900s, they were part of a community of 40 families that owned around 200 acres. They had a church, a school, a store, a post office, and even a practice hall for their town band. By any standard, they weren't just a neighborhood or a community or a crossroads. They were a town. Written and oral history have told us much about Sugarland in general, and a fair amount about the Dorseys in particular, but archaeology is greatly expanding the story. And it's a reminder to all of us in Montgomery County that there was important Black history here in the decades between emancipation and the Civil Rights Movement.
The Sugarland Ethnohistory Project based its book on records, photos, and oral histories collected by the town's residents and their descendants, as well as local church records. There was little archival evidence about the Dorseys' 1874 house or farm. The buildings were gone except for 4 large house corner foundation stones. With Professor Tetrault on the team, they won a grant from the Maryland Humanities Council to fund archaeological fieldwork and research aimed at uncovering architectural evidence of the house. The building and artifacts could shed new light on the lives of this African-American family. The team registered the archaeological site with the Maryland Historical Trust, and they prepared a detailed plan to test the Dorsey yard and foundation area for what they believed was the original house. They recruited and trained volunteers and interns to put in test units to find and define the house boundaries and locate artifacts, identifying, cataloging, and curating all the artifacts according to archaeological and museum standards. Finally, they published a detailed public archaeology report and a new African American archaeology curriculum module teachers could use in kindergarten through 12th grade, along with a virtual exhibit about the site and excavation and a virtual walkthrough of the site.
Hi, I'm Councilmember Will Jawando, and I'm delighted to present this award to Tara Tetrault, Professor of Archaeology and Women's Studies at Montgomery College, and to Suzanne Johnson, President of the Sugarland Ethno-History Project. They have both done incredible work, now award-winning work, for our community through the Basil and Nancy Dorsey Homestead Site Archaeological Project. The Dorseys were one of the oldest families in Sugarland, which is an early and very significant African-American community here in Montgomery County. With so little archival evidence available, it was especially important to dig deeper and to tell their story in a new and more meaningful way. Every step the team took in planning and implementing their project was performed at the highest level of professional standards. Amazingly, they kept within their budget and their time period that they allotted for the project. Tara and Suzanne's careful archaeological study of the Dorsey homestead produced a detailed report, an online exhibit, a virtual tour of the site, and curriculum, all of which will serve generations to come. It ensures that this important history will not be lost or forgotten. The curriculum provides a special opportunity to our young people to educate them about the early local African American communities and their contributions to our great county, state, and nation. In addition, the module introduces students to the science of archaeology itself as a tool for learning history. So thank you. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Professor Tetraholt, President Johnson, and the whole Sugar Land Ethnohistory Archaeological team. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition.
My name is Suzanne Johnson. I'm the president of the Sugar Land Ethnohistory Project. On behalf of the Sugar Land Ethnohistory Project, I would like to thank you for this historic preservation award. The archaeological project, led by Tara Tetraholt, uncovered many artifacts, giving us a glimpse into the lives of the Basil and Nancy Dorsey family. This family was one of the original families that lived in the African American community of Sugar Land. The land was purchased in 1871. Preserving this rich history serves to teach all of us the faith and strength the founders possessed as they built their homes after emancipation. The items uncovered show proof of their daily lives. Buttons and buckles from their clothing, tools, utensils, and animal bones give us evidence of their presence. The members of the Sugar Land community worship together, work together for everyone's mutual benefit. The work of Tara and her team have helped to fulfill the vision of the Sugar Land Ethnohistory Project, which is to document and preserve the history of this historic African American community. Thank you.
Thank you, Montgomery Preservation, for recognizing this project. The archaeology of early African American communities is rarely documented. First, I owe a debt of gratitude to Gwen Reese and to Suzanne Johnson. Without their invitation, I wouldn't be here. So thank you very much. I am very grateful to Ron Nunn for assisting in managing the fieldwork, and I'm also very grateful to historian Jeff Sipek and archaeologist Chrissy Ames for their feedback on multiple drafts of my report. I would also like to thank Frameless Technologies and History Associates for their creative virtual exhibits. And finally, I would like to, I can't say enough about my volunteers. Without my volunteers, I would not be able to do the field work and the lab work that goes into these projects. The presence of the onyx setting, a child-sized teacup, the pencils and the marbles that we found throughout the site show that the Dorseys had strong beliefs in religion and education, but they also took time out for each other. While written and oral histories let us view the past, archaeology gives us new insight into the people's daily lives. Together, they provide a rich interpretation of the past. Thank you so much for this award.
I've been lucky to have been a volunteer at the Dorsey Archaeological Site in 2021 and for part of 2022. And I really have to mention what a great opportunity it's been for everybody involved. As long as you're willing to deal with the dirt, the bugs, the heat, the occasional snake, Tara welcomes you even if you don't have any prior experience with archaeology. And I had no archaeology experience last year when I showed up. You can be a Montgomery College student, a retiree, a grad student, a neighbor. As long as you have a free day here and there and you're up for some very careful and detailed work, then she wants you to share in this experience. And she wants to show people what archaeologists do and why we need their work. There's a ton of paperwork and measuring and record keeping involved, but you come away, I think, with a real appreciation for how those artifacts that you always see in the display case got there in the first place for others to look at and learn from. The great thing is we've all gotten to pull these things out of the ground with our own hands and hold them. And that just makes the past seem all the more real because you can literally feel it. You can literally hold it in your hand. And that outreach aspect is really vital. And in my opinion, I think it makes this award just all the more deserved.
The Montgomery Prize recognizes continuous outstanding achievement in furthering the aims of historic preservation in Montgomery County. MPI proudly presents the 2021 prize to public historian Susan Cook Soderberg. Montgomery Planning Director Gwen Wright will describe Ms. Soderberg's long and productive career as a historian and author, and County Council member Craig Rice will present the award.
So I am really pleased to join with Montgomery Preservation, Inc. to celebrate Susan Soderberg. I have known Susan almost since I started working in Montgomery County in 1987. I first met her when she was a citizen activist and resident in the Germantown Historic District, and we were working on a master plan amendment for Germantown, and we were looking at all of the historic resources in Germantown, and she provided all sorts of amazing information and very passionately advocated for recognizing the small cluster of historic buildings near the train station in Germantown, and really recognizing the importance of the history of that part of Germantown. Later, I got to know Susan even better when she came to work for the planning department in the historic preservation section. And we hired Susan to really work on all of our education and outreach activities. And she did an amazing job. She ran our Historic Preservation Grant Fund back in the day when we had historic preservation grants that we gave out. She also worked on activating many of our park-owned historic sites. It was Susan who created the idea of celebrating Emancipation Day at Oakley Cabin and of looking at how to really interpret Oakley Cabin. It was Susan who came up with the whole idea of the Underground Railroad experience hikes at Woodlawn Manor. She was very focused and is very focused on really understanding and interpreting all aspects of the county's history, including the history of enslaved people in the county. She's done a lot of research on Josiah Henson. She has worked on the whole Underground Railroad history in Montgomery County. She's brought to light so many different parts of the county's history that without her hard work, without her dedication, we would not know about. We would not have these wonderful historic properties interpreting these important parts of our history. So Susan is a gem. She's priceless. And I can't think of anyone more deserving of the Montgomery Prize than Susan Soderberg.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2021 Montgomery Prize to Susan Cook Soderberg for her long and productive career as a public historian. She began her promotion of historic preservation in 1985 with a column in the Gazette newspaper, followed by self-publishing a book on the history of Germantown. After all, returning to earn a master's degree in American Studies from George Washington University, where she was hired as a public historian by the Montgomery Park and Planning Commission. There, she was instrumental in the success of important projects such as Oakley Cabin, the Underground Railroad Experience Trail, the purchase of the Josiah Henson site, and numerous interpretive signs. After retirement, Ms. Soderberg continued her work as a volunteer and freelancer, performing professional quality historical research, writing and lecturing. She has authored books and articles on state and local history. Her latest work is a biography of Josiah Henson. Its planned release date is February of 2023. Ms. Soderberg has served on county and state boards and commissions and has provided expertise to many historical nonprofits. For more than 3 decades, she has been one of Montgomery County's strongest advocates for preserving historic sites. Her work has been especially vital for preserving those in Germantown, where she founded the Germantown Historical Society and currently serves as its president. MPI and Montgomery County are not the first to recognize Miss Soderberg. This past summer, she traveled to Ontario, to the Canadian end of the Underground Railroad. In the town of Dresden, she gave the keynote address at a ceremony for the renaming of the Uncle Tom's Cabin Historic Site to the Josiah Henson Museum of African Canadian History. For her deep dedication to research, publications, advocacy, and for her support for students, other researchers, and historical societies, I am proud to present this year's Montgomery Prize to Susan Cook Soderberg. Susan, we thank you so much for making sure that we remember our history so that we know where we are going. Congratulations.
Thank you all. Or since I'm from Virginia, I should say thank all y'all. This award means so much to me because it comes from my peers. It not only touches my heart and humbles my soul, but inspires me to keep continuing my work. So what is my work? Why did I become interested in history in the first place? I had put my career on hold to raise my 3 children. But after my children were in school, I had a big decision to make: what to do with the second half of my life. This is a decision I'm sure many of you have also faced. And there were many paths to choose from, but it struck me that every path had a history behind it. So my first conclusion was that everything has a past. And secondly, was that the past is always with us. And my third conclusion was that if we don't learn the lessons the past has to teach us, we are doomed to repeat it. Thanks to Santayana for that last one. So I went back to school and I achieved a master's degree in American Studies. Why not a PhD? Well, this was because my goal was to talk to and write for the people, not just other academics. And this is what I've been doing for the past 30 years. Of course, historic preservation is a part of this, but to me, historic preservation is not just about beautiful or interesting architecture, or about marking the place where a famous person lived. It's a very important part of telling the story of the past, because a structure, like a shard of pottery or personal letter, is a primary source of the truths about the past. It can reveal how people lived their daily lives, the rich, the poor, what was important to them, what rituals they practiced, what beliefs they held, among other things. My passion for history may have come from my growing up in colonial Williamsburg. It may have come from the family stories I heard about my ancestors. It may have come from my competition with my older sister, or just from my natural curiosity. But my insistence on accurate research comes from my belief that without truth, there cannot be justice, and without justice, there cannot be peace. I hope my work can be an inspiration to others. Thank you.
Congratulations to all those recognized by the 2021 Montgomery County Awards for Historic Preservation. These extraordinary accomplishments open our eyes to the history all around us and to those who endeavor to help us appreciate it. Montgomery Preservation hopes that you will keep an eye out for history everywhere and that you will share this film with others.